development. Kate Donovan, one of its co-founders, is with us today to show us how to build and grow veggies and fruits in raised beds. Please welcome Kate Donovan.
Thank you, Donna. Hello, everybody. It's an honor to be here. Just to let you know a little bit more about who we are. It's me and my partner, Eric Bromberg. He's a master gardener. So we started this I'd say about 3 years ago. And what our main purpose in life is to get everybody especially in the Massachusetts and Rhode Island area, to grow food. Whether you do it in a pot, whether you do it in the ground, whether you do it in a raised bed. Everybody can grow something. It's good for kids, something you can take from the age of 2 to the age of 200. So that's what we try to do. We have about 40 some odd presentations, probably close to 50 for this year set up. Most of the majority of them are in public libraries, so the towns sponsor us to do them. And they're all listed. We have a calendar right up. It's BlackstoneValleyVeggieGardens.com. So you can see us whether you're in the Medford area, the Dedham area, the Uxbridge, Townsend, all over the place. So you're more than welcome to definitely give us a look. We're also on YouTube. And everything you see, the vast majority of our work is just in getting the normal folk to grow food. So one of the things that we do is we try to give people some good experience on how to grow food without getting frustrated. Sometimes it doesn't work. So one of the tools that we use here is raised beds. So you might ask, why do people use raised beds? What's the benefit in using raised beds instead of growing in the ground like our grandparents used to do? My grandpa used to do that, and I don't know how he could do it. There's so many weeds. So one of the things about raised beds, one of the reasons is it reduces the weed growth. When you install a raised bed, the first thing you do is you line the bottom with either landscape fabric, maybe cardboard, or newspaper, something that mulches, turns into mulch over time. And that any weeds that are under the ground are dead by the time they make it up those 8 inches or 12 inches of soil. So it also prevents soil compaction. Why, you ask? It prevents soil compaction because you build your own soil and you know what you're doing. So we actually have a recipe on how to build nice, airy soil so that your plants can grow without, the soil won't get all compacted and the roots will have a chance to spread as they're supposed to. Okay, also, same reason, because you add your own soil, and the soil is going to provide some good drainage because you're building it yourself. So you want good drainage. I remember one time I went to help a client do an analysis of her garden and do a garden design. I went over to see her raised bed, and they had puddles of water on top of them. And I didn't even know where to start. I didn't want to make her feel bad, but you know, you're supposed to have nice airy soil, so that drains, almost like a sponge. You should be able to take your raised bed soil and squeeze it, and it kind of clumps together, but it just stays a little moist. A good soil is everything. Also, it reduces the pests that come from the ground. Obviously, it won't eliminate the pests. Why won't it? Because every time you fertilize or you put some water in there, there's going to be some hungry bug that's going to come flying in from the outside. So we have some remedies for that I'll share as well. But it does reduce some of the pests that come in from the ground, such as slugs, ants, etc. It reduces erosion. One time my partner over here, he has a huge plot at the Uxbridge Community Garden. And it was an extremely beautiful soil. It was an old cow pasture. However, it was rainy. It was one of those, springs are funny like that here in New England, right? You never know what you're going to get, like a box of chocolates. So it rained so hard that all the soil just kind of ran off. So when you're in a raised bed, obviously it's got 4 sides, so it kind of contains the soil for you. And again, this is one of my reasons. I'm in It's funny. I'm in Blackstone, so I'm in Zone 6A. I do lessons out in, we do presentations in Dedham. That's Zone 7A. We go up to Marlboro and do, that's 5B. But in any case, it's all around the same growing schedule. But whatever they say, they say you plant your tomatoes. Some people wait till Memorial Day, but I do mine a little earlier because my soil is nice and warm because I have it in the raised beds. Okay, so I want to go over a few types of raised beds for you. What can you build your raised bed out of? Well, the opportunities are boundless. And there's one I don't have on here. I'm going to bring it up in the end. You always think of something, doing these presentations. So wood. This is what a lot of people build their gardens with, their raised beds with, wood. And they use a lot of cedar, it's rot resistant, or there's other woods, redwood, very expensive. There's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. A lot of us gardeners are frugal. I'm cheap, but a lot of us gardeners are frugal. We want to reuse, repurpose, recycle old stuff. So a lot of people, I've seen them, and I don't know what to tell them when I go and look at their gardens, and they're using old pressure-treated wood. Old pressure-treated wood has arsenic. It has been determined not to be safe. So if you're tearing down your old deck and you have pressure-treated wood, dispose of it. Don't use it in your garden because will you die from it? I don't know, but it's not healthy anyway. And we want to stay as organic as we can. You put yourself out doing all this stuff for your good health and to provide good, healthy food for your family. One thing you don't want to do is feed them something that's considered a poison. The other thing is the newer pressure-treated wood. The government, whoever, FDA or whoever regulates this, says the new pressure-treated wood is safe. It is no longer laced with arsenic. They now coat it with copper. Now, copper, so that the wood doesn't rot. However, it also has antifungal properties, but it is not an organic source. The plants do take it up, but when you grow in pressure-treated wood in your raised bed, you cannot consider your garden organic. So I don't know how important that is to you folks. It's important to me. I'm a cancer survivor, so I like to keep my food as clean as I can. So that's the wood. A lot of people, I have some of my raised beds, I have like 8, I think now. I keep expanding. You know how that is, right? If you're a garden person, you know how that is. You just can't seem to get enough. So I have some that are made with cinder blocks. You'll see a picture of some. And they keep it nice and warm. It's a really, really inexpensive way to build a raised bed. I have 8-inch by 8-inch by 16-inch cinder blocks. I think they each cost $1.49. The whole thing is, it's a real lot of work to put them in there. And you either, and you'll never have to worry about it because they'll last forever. So you pay now or you pay later, I guess. And you either spend money or you spend the, I had mine, I had a whole crew of people over to help me put it in. So it's relatively, lasts a long time, but obviously a little laborious to put it in. So, composite lumber, I have this woman that Eric and I are going to be working with. She's a full-service landscaper. And she says a lot of people now are using, I call it composite lumber. I don't know, the Trex stuff that people use to build their decks with. It's kind of heavy and it's more expensive, but supposedly it's good for raised beds. And supposedly, from what I'm hearing, it doesn't leach any of that dye or whatever. Even from the special brackets you use, nothing leaches in. So you might want to, if you don't mind spending the extra money over the wood, you may want to invest in composite lumber. Steel, another, you do see some pretty, you'll see pictures, some pretty decent steel or aluminum or what have you, raised beds that you can get. And they're wonderful. However, the top 3 have a tendency to keep the heat in. The thin metal that they use that's not so efficient as far as keeping your bed nice and warm, if that's important to you. Okay, so let's talk about the fill. Your soil is life. Your soil is everything. And that's why you want to build in raised beds. The main thing is so that you can control, what you're growing. This is what I use. Your mileage may vary. Everyone. And the other thing, before I go over this recipe that I use, I want to tell you that I use this recipe because I've used a lot of recipes because I teach these classes and I like to know, I like everybody to have different, I don't tell people how to do it, I'll give you alternatives. Some people buy organic raised bed potting soil right from Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever. Miracle Grow has some, the Kellogg brand has some, so you can buy it already in a bag. It costs a lot of money, but every year you'll have to top it off a little, but it is the way to go for a lot of people that don't want to bother with composting. But as far as I'm concerned, we have enough leaves and enough straw, enough scraps, veggie scraps, that everybody should probably be composting anyway. That's my thought. But I'm a garden nut, so. Okay, so I put 40% compost. Now that compost is compost that you make or compost that you may buy in the bag. Because I have a huge garden, I've actually had a call on my friends over in Mendon, Mass, the next town over, and the Greener Acres, that is a dairy farm. And they compost big, huge piles. They compost all their cow manure with the straw. It gets steaming hot. It doesn't smell, and they deliver that. So I have to top mine off every now and again. So I use 40% compost. I use 25%. I use peat because it's nice and fluffy. It also has a higher pH. Typically your gardens like a higher pH. And some people use coir because they think that a sphagnum peat moss is not as renewable as people would like. So they prefer the coir. It's a little bit more expensive. But I do put that in because it helps to make a nice, light, fluffy soil, which is what you want. So also vermiculite. Vermiculite has anybody, of course you have, if you've ever bought the potting soil, and you look and you see those little flecks of white. I swear for the longest time, I thought that was styrofoam. It's not. It's either vermiculite or perlite, and what it is, it's a mineral-based product that's it's not. I mean, it's for organic use, but instead of the roots getting clumped together as they can have a tendency to do, the roots actually fan out and grow around those little particles of vermiculite. So it helps the root growth, because roots are everything. You have to believe me because you can't see the roots growing. You can see your plant coming up, but the roots are something they're most important, of course. In the raised bed, that's what absorbs all the water and all the nutrients, etc. So, and I use topsoil, and I'm going to tell you why I put some topsoil in there. I put some topsoil, regular old dirt, I guess you could call it, because the compost and the peat are from life. Material. So, ashes to ashes. So over time, you're going to get compaction and you're going to lose a lot of it. So you have to top it up. You want to top it up every year just because you want to have the, you want to keep your soil with a lot of the nutrients that get used in the growing process. But topsoil is made with little rocks and, pieces of granite and all kinds of stuff. So that will help give your bed some volume. And there's nothing wrong with adding a little bit of minerals, rock material, into your fill. Some people, instead of the topsoil, especially when they grow a lot of rooties like carrots and beets, etc., they actually put sand in there, which is good. Coarse grained sand. You can get a bag of it at Home Depot or whatever. So, but again, you can always get the. How much is Eric? How much is the bag of the Miracle Grow potting soil?
The raised bed soil I use?
Yeah, the raised bed.
is about $8 for 1.5 cubic feet.
So $8 for 1.5 cubic feet. So you need, typical raised beds that we build are 8 feet by 4 feet, so it takes, and they're 10 inches high, so and it takes 27 cubic feet of raised bed soil in order to fill it up. So it's a little bit expensive. But then again, it's an investment, you know, so and every year you probably have to put maybe 1 or 2 bags in there to top it off. So I want to tell you, if you're not making your own compost, I want to tell you that it's not a bad idea to do so, because you have that stuff in your yard anyway, and if you don't have enough autumn leaves that fall, please come and see me over in Blackstone. I'm in the middle of the boonies and I have a whole ton of trees around me. So for the nitrogen, when we talk about compost, nitrogen are green stuff that's recently alive, fresh grass clippings, hay, green garden waste, coffee, hair without chemicals in it, kitchen vegetable scraps. That's nitrogen. 1 part of nitrogen to 3 parts of carbon. What do I use for carbon? Fall leaves. Those are, you think carbon, it's typically brown material. It's dead already. It's straw, leaves, sawdust, shredded newspaper, cardboard, dryer lint. Might as well give your dryer lint a second life. Shredded brown bags. Where I live, they're not allowed to sell product in the plastic bags anymore. They all have to use the paper bags. Of course, it's best to bring your own, but if you do end up short and you take some of those paper bags home, I tell you, you can't reuse them that much because they're kind of flimsy, so they really go good in the homemade compost, and pine needles as well. So everybody should be at least attempting. We do have a separate class and a separate presentation on composting. If you want to know more about it, you send us an email. There's cards there, and we'll get the presentation to you and tell you when there's going to be a class on it as well. I emphasize it because in vegetable gardening, especially in raised beds, it's all about the soil, as I say. So what you want to avoid is ashes from coal and charcoal can make you sick. Any kind of carnivore droppings from your cat or your dog, they actually, not only will it make your compost smell bad, but it actually has a bacteria in it that can make you sick. So you want to avoid that. Fish, meat, bones, I'm telling you, I think that it probably would work. Eventually, years and years, everything composts, because if it's alive, eventually it will. However, you're going to have every coyote, every wolf, or whatever we have that eats meat. Fisher cat, that's what I was trying to think of, fisher cat. Grease, fat, grease, and oils don't break down well. Anything with dairy smells to high heavens. Or anything, again, I like to go organic. Any kind of sawdust. Sawdust is good for your garden. It's good for the compost. However, if it's used for chemically treated wood, nah, you don't want to use that. So those are things you basically avoid. Okay, so let's talk about how to build one. Okay, we'll start on that topic. Raised beds, typically the raised beds we build are 4 feet by 8 feet. They can be, I have some that are 3 feet by 25 feet. The secret is you don't want them to be more than 4 feet wide. The reason is you want to be able to reach in and do your weeding. You want to be able to reach in and do your harvesting. You don't want to have to step. Why would you build all that nice fluffy soil only to step on it and kill something? So you don't want that. So they're at least 4 feet wide, and they're as long as you want them to be. Of course, when you plan your garden, you have to plan, where the sun is, etc. That's another class altogether. But they should be no wider than 4 feet. They're at least 8 inches high. I tell you, I have the cinder block raised beds. They're single high, they're 8 inches. I grow melons in there, I grow squash, I grow, tomatoes have a good sized root. I don't have any issues with them. The only thing is, not so much potatoes, you have to hill them over. So, and 12 inch will accommodate even potatoes. So they don't have to be real high. They can be real high. People have a bad back or what have you. But understand, if you're building your raised beds 3 feet off the ground, and you're growing a tomato that's an intermediate tomato, it can grow up to 7 feet tall. So you're going to need a ladder to harvest. So you're going to plan this stuff out. I would think if you want something high, you go 2 feet high, and you can do that. The only thing is that the soil you put in there is expensive, and the more you get, we talked about a 10 inch, you take 27 square feet, to fill up the raised bed. Now, if it was 20 inches, what's 27, 54, whatever it is, feet of soil. So what a lot of people do is they put crummy old topsoil or just about anything down in the bottom, just to kind of raise it up. So, people with bad backs, I think everybody should garden, even elderly, if they can. So, but the higher the better, understanding what you're growing and etc. So, just talk about before you plant. Before you plant, you line the bottom of the raised bed, as I had said, with a landscape fabric or cardboard or a few sheets of newspaper, thick newspaper. And those turn to, they're natural products. They actually turn to mulch after a while, but by the time they do, all those seeds that were underneath it will be dead. That's the hope. Okay, also, and you'll see, picture this, you mulch over your beds, because even though weeds don't typically grow up, they sure do blow in. So you mulch over your weeds, and you used if you have a lawnmower and you mowed over your grass, your fall leaves, you can certainly use those. Or I find a good bale of straw to be indispensable. I think I got one at Agway or something, and cover up. I actually put it on my garlic, because of course, if anyone grows garlic, you plant it in the fall. So I put it on fairly thick, and it keeps everything nice and warm. No weeds grow in, because anytime you grow an allium, onion, or what have you, the weeds love it. So, but you do definitely mulch over. So look at some basic designs, okay? So that's my simple. Only these are 2 high. Mine are only 1 high. And I have a, oh my goodness, I can't tell you how big my light room is. I have a ton of plants starting right now. So I have a whole bunch growing, and because I always have a plan B in case something doesn't come up. When you grow food from seed, you never know what's going to come up. Sometimes you have a bad batch of seeds, you have to reseed or what have you. So you don't always have that much. So I always end up with extra. So a lot of my extra plants I grow in the cavities of the cinder blocks. A lot of and just from doing it, I said, what grows really well in here are herbs, especially my herbs that I would never let in my garden. The nasty ones like mint that tend to take over and grow underneath. So I do make use of those cinder blocks, cavities. Okay, so this is a fairly simple one. As you can see, they have some rebar in there to kind of hold it up. And you'll see in the bed, that's straw in there. So they're mulching over. Good idea. Stop the weeds. So in this one here, they happen to have some spare lumber around, so they just threw some, use what you have. As I say, a lot of us gardeners are frugal. Some spend a lot of money, but some of us are frugal. So, and you notice one thing of interest is around any of these beds, what don't you see? You don't see any grass growing. That's by design. So you mulch around, or you put, some people do it on pea stone, or if you have enough drainage, you can actually even put a raised bed over concrete. But you don't want, because when you water your plants, you typically don't, you know, and a lot of us, when we feed our plants, if we use a fish emulsion, it's an organic fertilizer, we put it in the hose, a container that goes in the bottom of the hose, and no matter how hard you try, some of it will spill over. So you're going to get weeds growing up from the grass, and they're going to try to, you know, attack your plants. They do. You know, they'll try to attack your plants, and I've had years where I've had issues with, especially with alliums. So those are basic designs. I'll show you the high-end stuff. Okay, those are some purchased nice and high metal planters. Here's one that I really like, and I had a friend of mine that's built a whole bunch of these. The pests, you keep the pests away, right? Because it's got that chicken wire fence all secured in there. And even though it's a U shape, but you can walk around and you still have clearance to weed and clearance to feed while you're in there. So it's a nice little design if you have the sun for it. You know, tomatoes, and a lot of things take at least 8 hours of sun. And the best sun is the southern exposure. So there we go. And this, I wanted to show you this because this is a simple hoop house, they call it. I don't know why they call it a hoop. Those aren't hoops, they're only half hoops, right? But it's very interesting why people use those, and I have a couple of examples I'd like to show you. So, okay, and this, a lot of people tend to like this. Eric and I have built some for clients, and the only thing is you have to keep them relatively small because the soil is very heavy, especially when you have the plants growing. The soil, it gets very heavy, and then, you know, what do? I mean, if you built one 8 feet by 4 feet and elevate it, you would need some pretty sturdy wood because, you know, pick up one bag of compost and see how heavy it is. So anyway, they're typically smaller, they've got drainage holes, and they're really good for people that like gardening and you know, people that have a hard time with the backs. We've made a couple of those. People like them. They're pretty too. You can grow veggies in them. So let me talk to you a little bit more about this whole concept of a hoop house, okay? So over here, you get this bendable PVC. Does anyone ever see that bendable PVC stuff? You can get it right at Home Depot. They come in 6-foot lengths, and you just bend them over. And you bend them over, and you put a couple of these little brackets on there. I don't know if they cost you $2 a piece. They're fairly cheap. You put them in there, screw them in, and then just place the you just place it in there, the PVC, and bend it over. And then what they did is I don't know if that's Velcro, whatever it is, it's number 2, twine or twist ties, or, you know, the twist ties. They put it on there for support on the top. I don't think it's really needed, but it's all good. So that's what people do. And let me just explain what people are doing, and this is very useful. It gives your raised beds a whole new component, okay, more capabilities, okay. So this is my friend. This is my friend's raised bed. His name is Mark, and he couldn't be here today. But he made this. This is plastic sheeting, and do you know he gardened all winter with spinach and other real cool weather crops. So you see these here? These are just clips that clip on there. So what happens is, if you want to get a head start on your planting, this is the way to go. It gets 10 to 15 degrees warmer in this bed than it would in a regular garden bed. And also, it creates condensation. Has anybody ever started seeds? You know, when you start seeds and they have that plastic lid, you see the little droplets on there that come back raining. So you get they call that the greenhouse effect. So you get a greenhouse effect. It allows the sun to shine through. As I say, it allows you to plant earlier in the season. Bugs aren't gonna fly in there. Sometimes you've got nasty moths that fly and lay their eggs, and you've got problems with worms, etc. So nothing's going to fly in there. You can take the clip, if you do need to water, because you don't see any droplets on there, you say, oh, I need to water, you just take it up. And, when the plants are big and, it's warm enough outside, in the middle of July, you probably don't want that on there, because if it's 85 degrees, you really don't probably want 100 and some odd degrees in your raised bed. So the other thing is, in the winter, you would disassemble this and put it away. I don't think this is going to withstand, ice and snow and all that. You wouldn't want it to. But that's plastic sheeting. Typically, you can get that, like I say, right at. I don't mean to be a commercial for Home Depot, but I had one in the town I used to work in. But you can get it pretty much anywhere. I don't even know if is there a garden variety for this product? It's just regular plastic sheeting that you would use as a vapor barrier or whatever, right? So it's pretty inexpensive. So just to tell you, I'm not going to use that. So let me just tell you about my conundrum, something that I've been fighting. I grow new stuff every year, and I keep growing it until I get it right. I'll be 120 before I have a full garden, but what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using garden fabric. It's otherwise known as a raised row cover, and it's like it's actually porous. So let me it comes in various thicknesses. It actually does a lot of holding in the heat, but unlike its plastic brother from the other page, this actually allows for air circulation, and it doesn't have that greenhouse effect, but the rain can come right through it, okay? So again, it allows us to plant earlier in the season, prevents the pests. As I say, the rain goes through the fabric, and you would also fold this and store it in the off-season. It's almost like a cheesecloth, I guess. I don't know if anyone uses that. Anyone use that product? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to try it. So if we're back next year, I'll give everybody the version, because the jury's still out. So, all right. So I wanted to tell you a couple of planting methods that people use, because gardening is such an old thing that people have been doing it since we stopped foraging back thousands of years ago, right? But there are still new techniques that come out. You have people that, this different wintersown.org is a new way to start seeds, and then you've got straw bale gardening. There's always something new that comes out. I try it all. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. So, but in any case, people that have only limited real estate for their gardens like to pack as much in as they can. Okay, so they typically, you see that people get real elaborate. They take string and in their raised beds, and they mark off 1 foot squares. And this is basically tell you, let me see if this thing works. It's gotta work, right? I'm doing something, that's all right. So over here you see within a foot, 1 square foot, you will grow 1 tomato. You will grow 1 pumpkin. You would grow 1 eggplant. Let's get a little bit. You would grow 4 heads of lettuce. You would grow a whole bunch of peas. You grow a couple of celeries. You could grow some potatoes, 2 potatoes. So it tells you how much of what you can grow in the bed. So, but understanding that if you grow too much in the bed, you have to be vigilant out in the garden to make sure that the stuff doesn't get tangled, and you have to make sure you prune your tomatoes so they grow. If you're doing squash, you have to make sure that everything's trellised, and you can get elaborate as you want. I would think that for a beginning gardener, I don't know who's a beginner, I think you guys folks are all very experienced gardeners because you're at the Boston Flower and Garden Show, right? But the easier thing to grow in this would be smaller root veggies and greens and stuff like that. So, but anyway, that's one of the techniques. Has anyone ever heard of it? Okay, very good. Okay, all right. So we have and I got to give you some caveats about this one too. This is not a new technique. This is a very old technique that the Native Americans have been doing for hundreds of years, okay, thousands of years probably, right? The Three Sisters Garden, has anyone ever successfully grown one? Okay, no one, okay. So I want to give you a warning about it. So the Three Sisters Garden, in theory it sounds really good, and I know people that have done it. What happens is you grow your corn. Corn is a big plant. It sucks the living nitrogen right out of your soil. Okay, beans is a fixed nitrogen plant. It actually deposits nitrogen in your soil, and it actually needs some place to trellis. You know, the pole beans need some place to trellis. So it's a match made in heaven, right? So the plant, you plant the corn. Once it gets about like yay high, you plant some pole beans around it. They, you know, curl up onto the stalks, and everybody's happy. So, the third sister is the squash, not the zucchini squash, but the viney squash. And we talk about the viney squash because you want this to vine along the floor of the garden bed, so that it actually shades the garden bed. It prevents weeds from growing, So that's basically the Three Sisters Garden: the corn, the beans, and the squash. The thing about it is, if you do grow the corn, you have to grow Indian corn. So it's the corn they make maize out of. They have some really purple varieties. I don't know if anyone patrons the M.I. Gardner. He has a glass gem corn. It's absolutely beautiful. The sweet corn can be difficult. Also, they're big sturdy stalks. They should be big sturdy stalks if you grow it. And the other thing is, your squash, it tends to want to climb up anything. So you have to make sure when it grows its little tendrils, you have to make sure you keep it on the ground. But if you want to grow the Three Sisters Garden, you know, it's a long-standing tradition for thousands of years here in New England, and a lot of people do grow them in raised beds. So, okay, so that's the presentation. Oops, yikes. Okay, so I'm not sure the time, Eric?
5:10.
Oh, it's 5:10, that's fine. So we have time to take some questions. Typically, we leave some time in the end so that we can take some questions. So what have you got for me? Yes? You know, it's so funny that you should say that, because I was going to, and when I said, you know what, I really forgot to talk about drip irrigation and all that. So we can discuss that. If you have a single raised bed or a couple of raised beds, it's not a bad idea to use a drip irrigation, because the only part of your plant that needs to be watered are the roots, not the leaves. And matter of fact, if you do water, it's best to do it at night. If you do hand water with a hose, because you don't have drip irrigation, it's best to do it at night, because those little water droplets can actually end up on your plant and actually damage the leaves. So there are different types of drip irrigation. I do have this lady that I met from one of the denim classes, and she actually has a water barrel, and it's elevated, so the water comes through there, and then it goes through some kind of a pump to increase the power, and through the soaker hoses through her garden. So watering is certainly important. As I say, it's much better to water the ground. So keep that in mind, and make sure when you do water, you water at night, so that you don't scorch, especially in the hot summer, so you don't add those little magnifying glasses on the leaves. So, okay, anybody else? Yes? That's another one. Yes, sorry about that. That's another technique. That was a lasagna gardening. Have you heard of that? Okay, do you do it? Okay, so what that slide is, and I apologize for that. That slide is, people also do a no-till lasagna garden. You could, Eric, the book for that is,
Actually, I think it's actually just called Lasagna Garden.
the lasagna garden.
Yeah, not sure of the author, but there are a ton of books out there on the subject.
And what you do is you're layering your manure, your chicken scraps, your straw, and all, and you don't till it in. So I can't think that it would be, I would assume that it would take a while before you get your black gold out of it. If you have enough space, if someone's starting out gardening and they only have one bed and they want to be using it, that same spring. But it's definitely layering your greens and your browns, and I can send, if you leave it, I can send you more information on it. I did take it out because I didn't see a lot of people that actually did it, but it is a good way to do it. A lot of people, the whole reason a lot of people are doing lasagna gardens and basically doing raised beds is because they don't want to till the earth. It kills a lot of the microbes and the beneficial qualities that are in the earth, so they don't want to kill anything. So
Some sort of protection.
Yep.
So I would get like
Yes.
4 or 6 mil plastic sheeting, cut some slits in it, and then maybe even throw, like she said, some cardboard over the top of that.
Yep.
To create the
no,
layer.
the topsoil is topsoil. That's just the name of the soil.
Cut the slits in.
You actually mix it in. You mean when you mix in your soil mix?
Exactly, and then the
When you mix in your soil mix, you mix in the topsoil, you mix it in with the peat, you mix it in with the compost, and you mix it in with the vermiculite. You mix it all in. The only thing you lay on the top of your garden would be your mulch, whether you use ground up leaves or whether you use straw mulch. Some people use hay, second cut hay,
This is our presentation.
but it may have some seed in. That's what you're trying to avoid, right? One of the things you're
think that
trying
might have been
to
from the-
avoid
from the
besides holding it
previous one.
in the heat
Yeah,
is the
this is-
benefit, and then you don't want the weeds to get in. So straw or ground up leaves, so that have fallen. Yes.
So I know when you start your soil, you have that mixture, and then every year it gets smaller, and then you're topping it off.
Yeah.
What are you topping it off with a mixture of stuff, or do you just? Do
Well, you know what,
topsoil?
it's not that detailed, and let me just tell you, sometimes you get a feel for your soil. You do, you really do. Once you're in there, you know what your soil feels like. If your soil's kind of sticky and it's too wet, you might want to put in some peat moss to fluff it up more. If you've had a really robust, especially if you do something like the square foot method, if you do the square foot method and you've sucked all the nutrients out, then you may want to add more compost. Typically, the typical thing that you would add to a raised bed is you'd add more compost to it. Unless, as I say, unless the consistency is too wet, sticky. And another thing about that is the soil, the consistency of the soil is very important. So the better the soil is, the less fertilizers you have to use, and the more nutrients it absorbs from those roots. So it is a lot about the texture. So I would add, typically in the spring before I plant, I would add a bunch of compost. If it's too sticky, I would add some peat moss in there. No need to add the vermiculite, because the vermiculite is still there because it's a mineral. The same thing with the topsoil. The topsoil you put in there is still there. It's little pieces of quartz and all that, so it's not going to go anywhere. So, yes.
Do you use paper towels in the compost?
You can put paper. I put paper towels in.
What about newspaper?
If it has, I would put paper towels in the compost if it had grease on it, or any meat drippings or anything like that on it, butter on it. But if it's, if it's just something that had bread on it or something, I would. So just stay away from the.
What about the charcoal that is wood?
Excuse me?
The charcoal that's wood, can you put the ashes of that charcoal? Wood?
Can you put wood ash in compost?
No, the wood that you do charcoal with. Now instead of doing charcoal, sometimes it's wood.
I'm sorry, Eric. Can you tell me? I can't.
Yeah, she said, not the, you're talking not actual the charcoal briquettes,
Right,
but
they have-
actual charcoal that's made out of wood.
Wood, right.
Yeah, that
They sell it
particular,
now.
that particular ash. I guess that would all depend on what type of wood the charcoal
Okay.
was in the first place.
Okay.
Because certain woods like pine and cedar that are relatively acidic will alter the pH of your soil. So
Yeah, I don't know anything about putting coal ash, charcoal ash in there. It does say, there is a slide that says it can be toxic, so I don't think I'd put that. Wood ash I would, from your fireplace I would, in small amounts. I put in my compost, it has a high, it tends to raise your pH in your soil, likes it a little bit on the acidic side. So, any other questions? Yes? Eric, can you come up here?
yeah, absolutely.
You have to, he has to yell, he has no mic, but that's okay. Oh, okay. Oh, mic on the table, there we go.
Hi.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
I believe you asked about the black plastic mulch. Yep. Yeah, exactly. I actually use that. I have, like Kate said at the beginning, I have a 1,000 square foot plot at the community garden in Uxbridge, and I actually have the black plastic sheeting over the entire thing. And actually, it's beneficial in a couple of ways. I use the 4 mil one. Number one, it keeps the weeds down. Number two, it actually heats the soil a lot more quickly. The black will actually absorb it, and it does not do anything to the composition of the soil. And it's actually safe to walk on. You know, Kate had mentioned earlier, the last thing that you want to do is tread on your garden. That was one of the first things that my grandfather taught me, is don't walk on your land. So, but that black plastic sheeting absolutely is very, very beneficial. I get watermelons and cantaloupes that love heat, and Kate can attest to this. Last year I had some that was the size of basketballs.
Cantaloupe the size of basketballs.
It weighed about 10 pounds. It maxed out my 9-pound kitchen scale.
In watermelons like this, I could never, not yet anyway. We have a running challenge between us to see who grows. He couldn't grow lettuce, I grow it like a weed, so now he's learned that. So now I have to get the melons. I bought a whole new bed. It's in the front yard where it gets more sun. I'm going to try my melons. So, any other questions? Yes. Uh-huh.
So, you have to kind of follow the sun around, so would you put short vegetables in front of it?
I would.
And the tall ones
Sure.
there?
Yeah, I would. I would put it, unless, it depends on what's a heat lever. See, what, I have, if it's something that needs sun, a shorter vegetable, I would put it in the front, but I have other things that, like shade, for example, you don't want your lettuce or bulb to seed if it doesn't like the heat. So I plant that behind my tall vegetables. So, and I try to use the southern exposure. Sometimes you don't get southern exposure. You have to look for the east, or you have to grow stuff that doesn't require a lot of light. Typically, you should get at least 6 to 8. In order to have a decent vegetable garden, you should get at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight out of the shade. So.
And not only behind, but there actually is some good companion planting techniques. We actually have a class on companion planting and design also, where you can plant the things that like the shade actually in between, like corn stalks and tomatoes and sunflowers, things that really get tall. You can intersperse your lettuce and radishes and beets and other things that don't necessarily like too much sun, and actually too much sun is detrimental to those crops. So not only shielding them from the front, but you can actually shield them by planting them in between other things as well.
If you want the companion planting, please look us see us if we have one going on the web. If not, if you leave your email, I'll certainly give you that, send you that presentation.
And another benefit of that too is, let's just take radishes. Anybody who's grown radishes know that you barely have time to move your hand away from planting the seed before the radish is ready to pick. And when you pull it up, it actually loosens and aerates the soil for the other crops that are around it.
Every 3 weeks you can harvest your radishes.
Yep.
Any other questions? Very good. Thank you very much. It was an honor to be here with you today.
Sorry. Oh, it's okay.
So let's see. I want that companion planting, David.
What's your name anyway?
Yeah, she's coming. She'll probably come back. I don't want to write it on here. I
Oh,
already
no, that's
filled
what
it.
it's for. Oh, you
No,
did
I already
already?
filled it
Oh.
out. It came around. Do you want to?
Yeah, it's the only thing I was gonna fill it out there, but then I didn't want my email address being passed around.
Oh,
The whole place.
nobody would notice.
You know, not that anyone would. I know here that wouldn't matter.
Here we go, Joe. You got one more?
There you go.
Great. This will be perfect for me.
I'm on your way. I'm sorry. I'm
It's
like,
okay, don't worry.
Actually, we did it a little differently.
Oh, you.
Yeah. Now he works
Yeah, they're pretty much the same. Yeah, they're pretty much the same. Right, right. Yeah, they're pretty much the same thing. All that really are.
Do you want the presentation emailed? It's okay.
All it does is stuff your soil with animals. Yeah, because it was everywhere. It's like styrofoam, exactly. You're welcome.
Well, you can just email it to me then.
Yes, yes, you do.
Oh, and you can get your own. Is it next to mine?
Almost left my jacket.
Oh, you might need that.
I went in to cover my car. I went to and they told me the exact same thing. The problem I had was my brother made like us for me and he was pressure treated. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I hate, it's beautiful.
Okay, you can
not
grow
into
anything that doesn't produce you white
Worrying about cancer. I mean, it's not, how many days do you eat your fish? I mean, I
like
would,
to tell people is if you're growing a fruit, like a tomato or a cucumber.
it's just if you do one now, then you wouldn't use it for it.
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I wonder how much is
I have-
already leached
I
into the
also
soil.
have a raised bed that's already been done.
Cabbage, kale.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yep.
I'm sorry.
Yep. Right. Right. Yeah. So something that if it's consistently in the shade, or excuse me, not consistently, but if it's more shade than sun, I would go something that you're going to harvest more for the leaf than you are for the fruit. Yes, thank you.
Oh, you do? Yeah. Oh, no.
I told her that your grandmother had